Hi. If you guys weren't aware, recently we were given an artifact selector which allows you to pick a couple of the covenant and or not limited or collaboration artifacts to be selected from I guess a ticket, if you'd like to call it, which is a little bit weird because tickets and summons and stuff is a kind of odd right now. But regardless, I decided to, or I was actually in the process of making an artifact tier list, and in terms of, excuse me, what you should be looking for, what you should be prioritizing, I was in the process of making an artifact tier list and what I thought to be really good. And then I realized that making a tier list or categorizing these artifacts into a tier list is kind of difficult because, truth be told, you need a bit more context in that. And rather than put something into S, A, B, C, D, E, F, etc., it felt a little bit disingenuous, and rather what I decided to do was actually make something that looked like this. Now, this is a not in order artifact list as opposed to tier list, but I decided to categorize the artifacts a different way simply because saying that an artifact is S, A, B, etc. is not fair when certain artifacts are not popular, certain artifacts are only good when you use them against or with certain characters, and so therefore I decided to categorize it in a different way. The first list, or the first section that I have here, is a list of artifacts that feel great when they're maxed or that need to be maxed in order for them to even be considered. This includes things like the most popular option, Spirit's Breath, which, let's be honest guys, if you're doing Abyss, you're doing Hall of Trials, whatever it is, and your Spirit's Breath doesn't apply, well, you're going to be really upset. And that also includes things like Sigurd's Scythe, which, although it is more of a DPS or a stat increase, the increase in heal is sometimes significant and it kind of tops you up when you need it. Featured on this list are also things that are mostly or primarily damage increases like Wind Rider, where yes, it's not as though you gain an additional proc chance similar to Spirit's Breath when Wind Rider is upgraded to 30, but for the characters that you're going to be using Wind Rider on, you want to ensure that you have the damage and you want to be able to secure the kill. Now, of course, I understand that in terms of ordering, you may argue that something like Spirit's Breath being maxed is more important than something like Wind Rider, but we also have other things on this list like Golden Rose, which are, again, just stat increases, things like Elbrus Ritual Sword, which may not be 100% chance proc chances or 100% chances at plus 30, but the increased chance for Elbrus to proc does start to add up when you consider that Elbrus Ritual Sword can increase its total chance across several enemies and ends up not just being a 20% chance to activate a counter, but much higher depending on how many enemies there are. Furthermore, of course, we do have things that are really nice, but are more focused on things like mischance and hit chance, and that includes Sword of Autumn Eclipse, which is the warrior variation of Symbol of Unity, and that also follows the same kind of ideology behind Air to Surface Missile Misha. And again, to be clear, a lot of these artifacts are things that you wouldn't even consider using in most cases unless if they were plus 30, or they feel like they only activate or are usable at plus 30. And that's kind of the basis for a lot of the artifacts in this list. Others include things like Black Hand of the Goddess, which again, they just give you so much stat that it feels like you need them at max. And that's also kind of the case for something like A Little Queen's Huge Crown and even Beguiling Wings. Now, again, to be clear, this is not a ranking of, oh, you must pick these artifacts, you only can use these artifacts. And I've definitely, from this and the later part of this list, declined or didn't end up using some of these or declined to put in some of the other artifacts on this list just because I didn't see them used even slightly or had any justification, honestly, for putting them over another artifact. But that doesn't mean, of course, you are like forced into this list. If you want to pick something else that isn't on the list that I have right now, that's totally fine. But from the list that I have right here, these are the artifacts that if you were going to pull for them, or if you were going to pick them, these are the artifacts that you would need multiple copies of for it to make sense in order for you to actually use them. Or otherwise, like getting one copy of them, like getting one copies of Spirit's Breath and going from like 60 to 70% or something, whatever the proc chance is for this, that's not going to feel nearly as good as getting it from 95 to 100 or something like, again, increasing the damage of your Wind Rider or increasing the proc chance for Spear of a New Dawn to happen on your Senya or whoever you decide to use it on. Now, moving along, we have the next category, which is actually something that we have to talk about before we even get into the next section, and that's the depends on situation list of artifacts. This only includes a couple, to be honest, and though some other artifacts may include or may be listed in this section, the honest God truth is that with artifacts like Song of Stars, Unseen Observer, and Bloodstone, it was hard to say whether or not they fit into the needs to be maxed category or the next section, which I guess I'll spoil it right now, which is the one copy is fine section. But just based off of experience, sometimes you do need Song of Stars to be 100% if you're trying to make a one-shot reliable, if you're trying to make a hunt or whatever it is more reliable. Any PvE situation is dependent on the boss and the encounter, of course. So depending on situation, something like Song of Stars is really important. And the same can be said not necessarily only for PvE, but even for PvP with Unseen Observer. Someone or some characters like Flan may use something like Unseen Observer fine at +0 or with no enhancement or just with one copy by itself. But if you are running someone like Ashmancer or Elena, it is actually kind of important for you to get max stacks on the Unseen Observer. Number 1 for the souls, and number 2 for the damage that you increase alongside the combat readiness increase. Now, this is, of course, more subjective, and the reason why I put it in the depends on situation is because there is no one-size-fit-all, and this is no more true than for Bloodstone, which is the last artifact in this category. And the main reason for it being here is because I've seen people argue that if you just run all your characters on lifesteal, you don't need Bloodstone. I've also seen players argue that Bloodstone is mandatory. They save so much stat for you. If you don't end up having lifesteal, because lifesteal's Banshee and most players have something like Wyvern initially farmed out for, then Bloodstone makes no sense for you. Don't pull for Bloodstone at all. And so therefore, although one copy or maybe maxed may be the case, it kind of depends on what you're fighting, and I could definitely see the value in something like Bloodstone being used in expeditions when you're early on and you're trying to make sure that your allies don't die. But later on, and even for some players that end up using Bloodstone in some of the Nightmare raids or even Hell raids, the truth is that it's a bit of a safety net, but not so necessary that if you don't have it, you'll die instantly, you can't clear it. I've definitely cleared some fights in, specifically, I believe it's against Julevi Council, where I would forget to swap my Landy to Bloodstone, and I'd still clear. If I did have the Bloodstone, I'd probably be a little bit less pressured, and maybe I wouldn't have to be as worried. Maybe I'd need some better RNG, or I need better RNG for it to clear, but Bloodstone was not life or death. You must have this artifact. Now, furthermore, moving along, we have the one copy is fine category, and this is pretty much for all the other artifacts that I found to even have remote use in any scenario. That includes things like Elegant Candle, Doctor's Bag, Celestine, Bastion of Pelusia, you name it, it's probably in here. Now, in most cases, these are artifacts that, though they may have slight increases in proc chances, they're either not notable enough or not powerful enough for you to justify getting multiple copies of, or just having them by themselves gives you the max chance for something to happen anyways. This includes, again, things like Elegant Candle, which gives you a defense break just at base, but although you're able to increase the chance for this artifact, or the proc chance for this artifact, when you increase or when you imprint it with more copies, it doesn't get you to 100%, and that's one of the main reasons why Elegant Candle does not fall under the other two categories here. Now, Doctor's Bag and other artifacts like Bastion of Pelusia have their effect the second that you have them at +15, or at +0 rather, and that's why one copy is fine. Now, from this list, I would definitely suggest you consider artifacts, again, like Doctor's Bag if you're someone that likes playing with Moon Bunny. I would also consider using something like maybe, I don't know, maybe Goblet of Oath if you want to play with Peyra, since the turn cycling is kind of important. But these are all subjective or, account dependent artifacts, and there's really no one size fits all. Anyone that has basically been asked about what is the best artifact to take from the selector will probably give you a different answer depending on where you are in the game or where they are in the game and what they found to be impactful themselves. But that's why this list and this tier list in general, or list in general, I should say, is so difficult. Because for some players, well, they might have gotten 90 copies of Windrider already, and what's the point of Windrider? Although some other players will say, well, if you don't have Windrider, a character like Sid, Kisei, Vildred, whatever character you want to say, is unusable, which is a bit of an exaggeration. Now, again, also from this one copy list is fine, includes things that I guess could be nice if you had more value to them in terms of stats, but again, they're simply not popular enough for this to actually make a difference. That includes things like Alencia's Wrath, which gives you the combat readiness push if you get more stats from it, in addition to the additional health to whoever is using Alencia's Wrath. But in most cases, additional combat readiness push is a bit fickle just because there's speed RNG and sometimes it doesn't matter as much, and whether or not you won by 5% CR or 10% CR is kind of subjective and really does depend on what you're fighting or who you're fighting in, and that is no more true for Alencia's Wrath as Idol's Cheer, which is also really nice in certain situations when you want to have constant cycling, but there's going to be situations where someone doesn't hit your idol's cheer, both in PvP and PvE, and there's going to be times where they hit you 1,000 times. It's very subjective. It's difficult to say which is actually worth it. But if I had to give my recommendations from each, honestly, I feel like getting something like Wind Rider, Spirit's Breath, Elbrus, and Sigurd are pretty nice, alongside maybe on occasion Holy Sack if you are someone that likes to play with Abyssal Euphine. The depends on situation thing is probably something I'd get one copy of, maybe from each if you're really dependent on these artifacts or want to play the characters that use these. This is for characters like Iseria, maybe Ian if you're using one of the weird Wyvern 13 one-shots, Flan for Unseen Observer, Astromancer Elena, Astromancer Elena, holy crap, and then Bloodstone is for characters like cannaaaa or Landy. And then from this bottom list, I would definitely consider getting a copy of Doctor's Bag, maybe Rod of Amaryllis or Snow Crystal if you want to play some anti-crit shenanigans with some characters, and then probably a copy of maybe, Stella Harpa or Shamadra Staff if you're really desperate. Now, I have to come clean. I've actually kind of lied despite what I just said in giving you the recommendations for artifacts, because I actually have a third tier list, which is probably what you guys are actually looking for, which is the explicit realistic tier list. Now, again, in most cases, what or who you need from this selector will depend again on how many you have in your possession or how many you're willing to commit to on a specific artifact. But in most cases, these are the 6 artifacts that most players will suggest you get. Now, the reason why I've categorized it into S and A here is because, hands down, no matter what or who anyone says, having a higher proc chance of something will always feel better than having higher stats of something. That is just simply true because the more and more you get Elbrus in your face, the more and more upset you get. And to put this into perspective, if you had to flip things in, the opposite direction, where would you rather have, for instance, a max Elbrus Ritual Sword and a plus 15 Wind Rider, or a max Wind Rider and a plus 15 Elbrus Sword, or a plus 15 Holy Sack? You'd probably be really upset if some of these things on the top didn't proc over just having more stats for things on the bottom here. Now, again, I don't think it's that impactful if you swap any of these in between A and S, and if you decided to put either of these in a different category or a column between the two of each other. But the honest to God truth is that these are the actual best artifacts that you can choose from the list, and more often than not, since we've seemed to be given so many different selectors and artifacts all throughout the year, basically for sneezing, we get a ticket or a 5-star ticket for whatever reason. I don't think this tier list is nearly as impactful as something like a fully decked out selector, which if you guys want to see something like that, feel free to let me know in the comment section. But otherwise, guys, this was kind of my thoughts on the tier list and the selector that we were just given, I believe, Sunday night, if you completed out the entire artifact selector. But yeah, honestly, I think this is probably where I think most players will lie or kind of die on when it comes to the artifact tier list. And yeah, hope you guys learned something. Hope you guys enjoyed. Again, it's not supposed to be so much a tier list as much of an observation and more of a disclaimer or spread awareness kind of video. But yeah, thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed or learned something. If you did, make sure to like, comment, turn on the notification bell, and subscribe. I'll see you guys all next time. Stay safe, stay healthy. It's late. Or morning, technically, because it's shining. Goodbye. Bye-bye. Good night.